Accessing secret history files. Identify Dr. Brian Sovryn, 21st century anarchist, tech journalist, game developer, creator of the podcast Sovryn Tech, directly responsible for stopping the enslavement of humanity by the blockchain intelligence. By the year 2099, Dr. Sovryn's work would lead to the creation of various anarchist colonies in space and in Earth's ocean, as well as...
Are you ready for the hottest tech news, analysis, and commentary? Are you ready for the bleeding edge in science and ethics? Then it's time for Sovryn Tech. With your host, the golden stallion of the tech world, the man in triple black, the rated R radio star, Brian Sovryn. He has a really long, impressive resume. And now, here's Brian.
Oh, baby! You're listening to, absolutely, the official podcast of the future. Because you know that when you listen to this show, are months, if not years, hell, maybe even decades ahead of anybody else with what's going on in science, technology, and a little ethics on the side. Absolutely. The Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star. Ready to bring it on one more time. Now, boy, what a show we've got lined up here, because Google I.O. was that a hell of a thing. Talk about getting a glimpse into the future. However, doesn't mean it was all sugar and light, that it was all niceness. Maybe there's things there that weren't so grand. But we'll get into that for our main story. I told you I'd talk about it. I haven't done any blogging about it at zog.ninja. Kept it quiet because I want to talk about it right here. And I'm going to try and cover every project that they went over. So lots to get into. Why don't we get into, well, you know what? Before I do that, before I get into the random access, I just want to say I got some very, very gracious donations to the Sovryn Tech wish list, the Amazon wish list. Of course, you can go to wishlist.zog.ninja, and that'll take you right there. There's still plenty more going on that you can, if you want to donate equipment for. We're really trying here, I use, of course, the studio of the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy, and we're kind of trying to triple production of what can come out of this house. Okay? I'm really trying to ramp it up. And so I'm actually building somewhat of a second studio. So if you want to help out with that, wishlist.zog.ninja, there's equipment there that you can purchase that can help out with that. But someone actually got me I have a new computer now. It's a decently low-end machine, but I'm going to talk, maybe I'll talk about that during the climax, because I'm actually pretty impressed by it. So we have that going on, and thank you so much for everybody that donated through the Amazon wish list. That means a lot. And of course, you can also donate monetarily. You can go to donate.zog.ninja, and that will allow you to donate with coin, Patreon, and as well as PayPal, all the good stuff, all the nice ways. And if there's some other way you want to donate, just go to the contact form, contact.zog.ninja, and you can get in touch with me and, let me know how you'd like to do that. So I appreciate everybody doing that. This week was, last week was my birthday, but boy, it felt like it just kept on going into this week. Thanks so much to all of the Sovryn Tech listeners. It helps all this stuff helps in ways that you just you cannot imagine how much it helps. And how far it goes, really, in the amount of projects that it helps create. So thank you for that. Again, there's more equipment there if you want to help donate. There's even a grander computer, all kinds of stuff, mixing board, all that. So yes, we've got that out of the way. Why don't I just go? No. All right, one more. I do this all the time. I'm a podcast professional, really. Here's another way that you can help out the show. If you happen to know someone else that would like to advertise, I've had a lot of people ask me, boy, could you do, obviously you're compressing so much information into 2 hours with Sovryn Tech. It's so dense. This is what people tell me. I'm not saying it. would you ever be willing to do another show? And I've teased that I'd be willing to do another show, another episode per week, if not more. And let me tell you what it would take to do that. There's a couple possibilities here. One is that either like my Patreon donations, go up very significantly to where there is a value, and I can talk about this more in a future Sovereign Tech episode. To where I can afford to take the time to do another episode of Sovereign Tech each week. The other possibility is that if you know advertisers, if you know sponsors that would like to, that you think would be a great fit for Sovereign Tech, get them in, let me know who they are. Because if I can get more advertisers that I need to fill in, because I want to get great products out to people. I am not opposed. We talk a lot on Sovereign Tech about advertising, and really like a lot of the bullshit advertising that goes out there. And I don't play any bullshit on this show. Okay. And so if you know someone else, I don't mind advertising as long as it's, worthy advertising. I mean, kind of like how Twit advertises, how Free Talk Live advertises, how all these shows, they do these kind of, interstitial advertisements, whatever. I'm totally on board with that. I think that is the way to get stuff out to people. So if I can add on more advertisers, and thus I need to make space for more advertisers, and right now I have some room. I don't always, but right now I do. Then I will have to do a second show. And so if I have advertisers for a second show, I will do a second show. So if you know of anybody, get in touch with me, and I'll get in touch with whoever, however you want to work this out. And I mean, I do, for a show that gets thousands and thousands of plays a week, my rates, my sponsorship rates are incredibly low. Like ridiculously low. So, please, I like to be very competitive, and I just like to get great shit out to people. All right. And I'm always honored that people sponsor this show. Of course, we have great sponsors right now. We have Cool Trade. We have Roberts and Roberts Brokerage, which is just Tim Fry. Man, right on, baby. So anyway, that's how, if you're curious, because I've had a lot of people email me, hey, how can we get a second show? How could we get 3 shows? Look, folks, if I'm either, making it on Patreon, or if, I have enough advertisers, I mean, I'll do the show every goddamn day, and I could. Believe me, this mouth doesn't stop running, right? And this brain doesn't stop thinking. It just goes on and on and on. I mean, you cannot imagine the conversations the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy and I have every single day when we're in the shower together, when we're, oh yeah. I mean, wherever, when we're driving somewhere, flying somewhere, whatever the case. Damn. I mean, so believe me, I could just share all those conversations with you. I could have them with you. We could talk about the latest news, all kinds of wild stuff that we could do. So, if you want to see that happen, that's what it's really going to take for me. Is I have to be able to afford to take more time with the show. So anyway, all right, now let us get into the random access. Enough of the enough shop talk, as it were. And we've some interesting stuff this week. Why don't we start off with Uber? Uber released a new feature this week called the Trip Tracker. And what this is a way to, effectively, you personally, as an Uber user, and if you have, say, a family or a significant other or whatever, to track everywhere that significant other or family member goes, where they go, with an Uber, of course. I'm sure because the Uber app's on a phone, you could track it at any time anyway if Uber gave you the ability. But for right now, Uber just allows themselves to do that. And, of course, hands that information over, as we proved on Sovereign Tech, without batting an eye, that, they hand over all that information over to law enforcement and government agencies. They don't even need a warrant. Oh, you would like this information about this person? Here you go. And they just hand it over. So now they're letting you in on the game a little bit to where you can spy on, perhaps your lover, or whatever the case may be. And, so I can see, like, yes, it would be interesting, and I can see where, a lot of family members, perhaps, maybe ones that live in cities, would like to keep an eye on their kids, make sure they're getting home from school safe and all this stuff. There's some genuine use cases for this that I could really see. But, keep in mind, the little bit of power that they're handing over to you is, it really directly correlates, and it shows and it highlights to you just how much power they actually have over keeping an eye, over their, control over your privacy, or, with them doing this, your lack thereof. And I feel like, I remember when I got, it wasn't my first cell phone, but for a little while, like, I had a cell phone. I went into the military, and I was like, oh, I'm so glad to not have a cell phone now. And then I got out of there, and when I got out of the military, this is when I was living in Florida, I was like, yeah, I don't want this cell phone shit. It's like, I don't want it ever again. Because I feel like it's just a way for people to interrupt me and for people to keep track of me, to be able to, like, constantly call me or whatever. And I don't like getting interrupted and whatever. It wasn't necessarily a privacy thing, per se, but I ended up, due to a relationship that I was in, this would have been, I don't know, 04, 05, something like that. I ended up getting another cell phone, and holy shit. Now, this relationship really, at a certain point went south. And that cell phone was off the hook. Like, I mean, it was just ringing constantly, and it was just like it was madness, that somebody was able. Like, I just wanted to, like, get away from this, and I couldn't. And also, I was really like, yeah, I picture, and I don't know how the permissions and all this work around the Uber trip tracker, but if you are, like, I could picture some people in relationships being very controlling. And we talked about this because Google Hangouts, which is not long for this world, it would appear, also had added this feature to where you share your location within the app. And I was like, well, and I'm not saying I support this, but I'm just saying that, maybe sometimes you as an individual, and you are an individual, there's something you want to be doing, and maybe you don't want anybody to know. And it's not nefarious. It's not malicious. You just want some privacy from the fact. Or, maybe there's something, very, very serious that you're dealing with, that you want to deal with privately with somebody else, whatever the case may be. This would nullify that. Maybe you're in a terrible, like, I've been in this situation. Maybe you're in a terrible family condition. And maybe you're going to see a therapist, but you're doing it on the QT. You're doing it on the DL, the down low. And you don't want anybody to know about it. And you don't want to deal with the problem. And there's no reason, like, you're not required. It's the best thing for you to say, hey, look, honey, I'm going to go see a therapist, and I want you to accept this, and deal with it, whatever. Or whatever you're doing. You're not required to have to tell anybody that. And I would see this Uber trip tracker as like, oh shit. You would lose a lot of autonomy. I don't dig this. Like I said, I get the use cases, and you can say, I'm sure somebody's going to say, well, it's totally voluntary. Like, you're not forced, to use the Uber trip tracker. But this gets into, and I mentioned this when Hangouts came out with this feature, is that it's likely going to become somewhat of a trust issue. Or like a faux trust issue, to where your significant other might say, "What? You won't turn Trip Tracker on? Don't you love me? Why would you turn it off? What's going on here?" And all this stuff. I mean, and when all of that whole conversation and that whole social norm, none of that needs to exist. So I'm not saying this is necessarily, an evil. I mean, Uber can do whatever it wants, blah blah blah. I'm not saying it's some kind of grand evil thing. I'm just saying, like, let's respect people if they don't want to take advantage of this sort of thing. Okay. And also, I mean, even for kids, if they don't want a helicopter parent around them, well, then fuck, that kid's a human being. That kid's they're an individual. They're their own person. They can make that choice. So I don't dig it. I don't like these whole ideas. Now, a little bit of other Uber news. And if you think I'm off base about that, you can write in. and tell me I'm off base. That's fine. But in other Uber news, an area where I definitely wasn't off base is in Philadelphia. Uber is already, I think it's Philadelphia or Pittsburgh. Maybe it's Pittsburgh. But they are testing out driverless cars. Uber is testing out driverless cars. I said this so long ago, long before it was ever put in the news. I said that, look, Uber is not, everybody's saying, oh, what a great job opportunity and all this stuff. No, that job opportunity, all they were doing was laying out the infrastructure, and they were creating this narrative to allow Uber to exist in the first place. Because I think if Uber jumped from, if they just went and came out with driverless cars, Uber would have never taken off. People would have been too freaked out, and they wouldn't have gotten past the whole, taxi monopoly and all that. So they needed, they went incremental. We might talk about this a little bit more in this episode, this idea of incrementalism, which I disagree with, but in the popular mindset, I understand why people think this way. But anyway, this was the natural progression, was that, you have human drivers, you take on the taxi monopoly, you give people a bunch of jobs, you make people love it. And believe me, a lot of people loved it, including people that should have been a whole hell of a lot smarter. And then you rip all those jobs away, you put in autonomous cars. It happened. It's real. My theory ended up being absolutely true. And this is why I think one of the biggest backers of Uber was Google Ventures. Because obviously Google Google spearheading the driverless car, and that this was a part and parcel. So it's happening, folks. I could see, yes, there could still be like a desire, like perhaps in apps, like in the Lyft app, which Lyft is a far superior service. In the Lyft app or in, the Uber app, there could be a selection for, do you want a human driver or not, or whatever. But I mean, granted, if there's not enough demand for the human drivers, like not many people are going to do it, or maybe only some degree of hobbyists would do it, which that's an interesting, concept. But so maybe the human drivers won't go away entirely. I'm open to that, but it's a good bet that, someday they're going to go the way of the dodo. So if you are, and I'm not knocking you for being, that's great. Go make your money. That's cool. In fact, I know some just absolutely amazing people that work for Lyft and Uber, and I would, I'd love to get in the car with them. But just saying, be aware of this, that this is coming, that and also this is a warning to like a lot of economists and all that. Please stop saying that, that Uber and all this is this great thing for the economy and for, for creating jobs and all this bullshit, and the free market created jobs. No, actually, it's going to yank them all away. I'm not knocking the free market. I'm just saying that Uber was never playing as a free market competitor in the first place, ever. There you go. All right. What else we got here for the random access? Here we go. Another little follow-up. Amazon Prime members are now going to be able to purchase groceries and not just groceries and other items, household items, all this stuff, but Amazon branded. Now, I don't know if that necessarily is Amazon created, but it's going to be Amazon's private label. And you will only be able, and these are going to, as I understand it, these will come at a substantial discount, these groceries. And I mean, there's already, what is it, Prime Pantry, right? Where you can, you have to spend $50 and you get this huge box and it's loaded with all those groceries and everything. But they are, this is going to come at a significant discount, and you can only get it if you have an Amazon Prime account. Now, this is going to be very enticing for people, especially people in cities where you can get stuff delivered in the same day. Through, what is that? Not is it Amazon Now or something like that? Whatever it is within cities where you can get stuff inside of like an hour. One guy got something inside of like a half hour of ordering it. Just, unbelievable. And they're going to sell it at a significant discount. Amazon, I mean, this is a Costco play on Amazon's part, right? And we've talked about this on Sovereign Tech. Of course, we call it the Amazon World Domination Tour. No other company's doing this. Google has Google Express, where they're trying to get into deliveries and all this. Uber is trying to get into deliveries. Again, speaking of Uber, I've said on Sovereign Tech that really the only competition going on in Silicon Valley right now is between Uber and Amazon. Everybody else is really, very much behind the times, and I'll prove that more when we get into our main story this week. Okay, but none of these companies have what, are as far ahead of taking the digital space and having it mean something in meat space as Amazon is. They're not even close. I know some people, like we're going to talk about with Google I/O, they announced Google Home, which is supposed to take on the Amazon Echo. And people are saying, well, Google Home is actually better than the Echo. No, I don't think you're going to find it's better than the Echo when, you can talk to your Echo and you can get your groceries, your entire grocery list. You can just say it out loud and get it sent to you at a significantly less cost than any grocery store you could go to, and right to your house inside of, inside of a few hours. Yeah, sorry, Google Home's not going to compete with that, and it can't, particularly in the area of price, et cetera. But you're going to have an Amazon Prime account. Now, this is what I was saying, is that everything that Amazon is doing is all about getting you to pay for that subscription. That is their whole key. That's their business model. And right now, they're winning because, as we've said on Sovereign Tech, for years, Amazon never turned a profit. Like their investment sheets, their investment calls, all of it looked terrible. Now, they're one of the few companies where their stock's going through the roof right now because all of this is finally paying off. All of these ideas have finally come to fruition, and it doesn't hurt that they created an entire new tech category with the Amazon Echo that everybody's copying. And in fact, I'll give Google, Alphabet/Google just a little bit of credit here. They even, when they announced their Google Home competitor, they even admitted that Amazon, they mentioned Amazon by name. They said Amazon created a new category. I'll give you credit for at least because, and I'm sure on Google's part, this is them just making sure that they're not Apple, because that's what Apple does, right? Is they come out with something at the dead last, and often it's inferior, and they claim like they invented it, like they invented the whole idea. No one else ever came up with the shit, kind of like Surface and the iPad Pro. Yeah, Google was making sure they didn't fall into that paradigm, and good for them. Like, seriously, good for them for not pretending like somehow they invented something that nobody else had ever thought of, when actually there's superior versions of the product out there, which, as it stands, granted, no one's held a Google Home yet, or, no one's really used it or tested it in the wild. Just on paper, it looks like the Amazon Echo is the superior product, just based upon what you can actually do with your, Amazon Prime account and all this. But, that Amazon Prime account matters because that's the only way the Echo works. I guess maybe that'll be an advantage over, with the Google Home, is that you don't have to pay to be a part of the ecosystem. With the Echo, you've got to have that Prime account. Wow. Anyway, I want to save the rest of that for Google I/O because it's really worth talking about. Here, more interesting news. This is kind of coming out of nowhere, and I don't want to spend too much time on this topic, but I'm a little I'm excited and skeptical at the same time. Nintendo. And by the way, thank you to everybody who said they really loved having Game Talk back in the show. I appreciate that. I love talking about it. We've got a doozy in this week's episode. But Nintendo they are now apparently going to be making movies. They're not only doing that, they're doing all kinds of shit. They are apparently going to open up restaurants. There was at an investors meeting, there was a whole bunch of, as I understand it, there was a whole bunch of stuff laid out, and they have tons and tons of plans for all kinds of wild stuff. And this is interesting because, much like Amazon created a new category, really Nintendo is one of the rare companies in the entire world that genuinely innovates and does quantum leaps and pushes things forward. And I mean it. They do quantum leaps. They are the antithesis of incrementalism. And honestly, they can show that it pays off. You've got to do it right. You've got to make it fun. We'll talk more about that later. But they are going to be making movies. Now, I'm excited for that. Like, I'd love to see a Zelda movie. I'd love to see a Metroid movie. I honestly, as long as it's this is one of the cases where I wouldn't mind a remake of Super Mario Brothers. Cause boy, that original one. Yeah. But this is a good idea. However, I'm a little concerned. Now, this isn't Nintendo doing this, but there was announcements that there's going to be a Tetris movie. Actually, it's a Tetris trilogy. Need I say more? Like, I love Tetris. One of the greatest games ever made. Dr. Mario's better, but Tetris is one of the greatest games ever made. What the fuck kind of movie are you? And it's supposedly, I think it's going to be like a science fiction thriller. I don't believe it. Like, how does a studio, like, I saw it on Twitter, and I tweeted about it myself. I mean, like, the absolute negative reaction and unbelievability over this. I don't get it. How does Hollywood not see that reaction and go, what the fuck? Like, no, we're not going to put money into this. This is going to bomb. This is going to be terrible. I don't get it. I don't know how that happens unless one of my theories on Sovryn Tech is that a lot of these Twitter grassroots hashtag movements and all this different stuff, unless Hollywood knows that 99% of things that trend on Twitter and on social media in general are bullshit and created by the media itself. And so they're not going to pay any attention to it, and they'll just release it anyway. Like that, it doesn't make any sense, because that's sort of the argument that you get today from a lot of people, speaking of advertisers and sponsors, is that, well, what do your metrics look like? How do we know, okay, your numbers on social media aren't up to snuff. And I'm not saying that's true for me. I'm saying for a lot of other people, how do these numbers work and all this stuff? You hear from all of these companies and business, you hear from business in general that they want to see these supposedly very solid metrics, which we've shown on Sovryn Tech. They're not solid metrics at all. None of them are. In fact, Gary Vaynerchuk, the entrepreneur, he wrote an article in Medium this week that said the social media numbers are absolutely meaningless. It's all about impact. The amount of numbers you have, the amount of likes, the amount of followers, all that stuff. None of that means shit. Which good for Gary on that one. But if supposedly all of these businesses run off of these metrics, this Tetris movie should have been, shot down, lit on fire and put to bed instantaneously the next day. They should have said, no, we're not doing this. So I don't get it. I don't understand that. But and there's other movies coming out too. There's going to be a movie based on Missile Command. I think there's going to be a movie based on asteroids. Now, I'm not saying those can't be great movies, but how about, release maybe like solid modern renditions of the games again? And you can do it. Like, I remember in 96, or was it 96 or 97, when the Asteroids remake for the PlayStation 1 came out. That was great. It was really, really good. And of course you have Asteroid Outposts, which is out there now, well, whatever. So I don't know how I feel about this. There's this weird, Hollywood is definitely they're pulling on the nostalgia strings, and they're not only doing that, but they're trying to appeal to a sense of history that they can't themselves create because they're not willing to put any risk capital in any new properties. So they're trying to appeal, like, do you get what I'm saying? They're making these movies. They're making a Missile Command movie because it kind of gives an air of credibility to the film right out of the gate, because it's based off of something that was originally released, 30 years ago. But that's only because they're not willing, to try and create, entire new mythologies like Star Wars or something like that. I mean, everything's a remix, no doubt about that. But this really goes to show the extreme lack of originality that Hollywood has. I mean, they remade Ben-Hur. It's coming out this summer. There's no need to remake that. Just put it back in theaters. Oh, but you can't make any good money off of it anymore. Oh, I see. Yeah, no respect for art. Anyway, whatever. I could go on about that forever. Another little update. I believe it was last week we talked about the situation where a gentleman had his iTunes, all of his music on his Mac was deleted from the PC, from his Mac, all because he set up, Apple Music and iTunes Match and all this different stuff. Apple has released a patch for iTunes this week to supposedly fix it. The problem is they said they could not replicate the problem. Well, if you can't replicate the problem, how exactly can you fucking fix it? But it is interesting that they are coming, and maybe this patch is just some degree of PR and, maybe the guy somehow screwed up or whatever. Okay. But, a lot more people came out about this, and enough of a stink was made that they, Apple felt like they needed to do something. But Apple did admit that they could see where this could happen. They can't replicate it, but they admit that there is a situation in where this could occur. So all these people saying, well, the guy was a dumbass. No, Apple admitted that, the glitch exists. The bug exists to where this could occur. There you have it. Go ahead and keep uploading all your shit and, go ahead and keep trusting your stuff to all these companies that, well, anyway, you can listen to last week's episode if you want to hear my thoughts, on all of that. Little Twitter news. They are now, granted, I was disappointed when they came out and said that they weren't going to update the Twitter, the character max character count they're going to put it up to 10,000 instead of 140 characters. I was disappointed by that, but they are kind of doing a bit of a compromise, and they are going to make it so that hashtags. Not hashtags. They're going to make it so that links and pictures do not take up any of the 140 characters, which previously they took up maybe 23 characters or something like that. And some people had said, and that's fine. I mean, I'm glad that they're doing that. Some people had said that they wished that, when you put in, a username that, that shouldn't count either. But I'll admit, I can see why they didn't use the username. Why they didn't do the username thing, because if you allow for infinite usernames, people are going to get spammed the shit out of on Twitter. It's one of the few nice features about Twitter is that you can't just send at everybody. You're going to have to do separate tweets or something like this. So I mean, maybe would I rather have it that the username didn't count? Yeah, I'd take the risk and rather have it, but I can understand why they didn't do that. I can actually appreciate why that's so. Another thing. Now this, if you go to zog.ninja, this is a story from a couple days back, and I have to thank the amazing Pixel. Of course, Pixel still gets mentioned in our new intros. But she had brought to my attention, not directly, but just on her own Twitter account, that about a really cool. This is an awesome idea. The idea of encrypting text and encrypting it as in making it not necessarily encrypting it, but making it not readable by image recognition software. And it's called ZXX. And you can type in zomiaofflinegames.com/ZXX and you can find my write-up about it. But the idea is making it so that image recognition, can't read what you wrote down. And it's a typeface that allows for that. Admittedly, some people say, well, eventually the recognition software will get around it. It should be a morphing, to some degree, a morphing typeface and all that. And I think that's good. And hopefully that'll come down the line. I understand that point and I agree with it. But this is great because it really is opening up. It is starting that conversation saying we need to be able to write stuff down that, cameras can't read, that doesn't get stored, et cetera, that just, ends up looking like gibberish. Now, maybe a year or two ago, we talked about on Sovryn Tech how cursive handwriting supposedly could not be read by image recognition software of whatever type. No longer, I don't think that's true anymore. I don't think that cursive, I think cursive can be read by image recognition software today, or image recognition technology, I guess I should say. But this is heading in the, ZXX is a movement in the right direction to where we are creating that. Because you should be able to write stuff down, without the possibility of something, potentially reading it, for whatever reason, I mean, there's all kinds of great applications for this. You can check out my write-up about it, but I just wanted to mention it. ZXX is the name of the typeface, and you can find it if you go to zog.ninja. I did a write-up about it. Another one here, another point proven. Boy, this just happens every week. BitTorrent Live. Now, this is interesting. BitTorrent Live is a streaming video service that's almost live. It's a little bit off of live just because it's using the BitTorrent protocol, and so it's not exactly real time. But that's okay. I mean, honestly, live television isn't exactly real time either, is it? It's off by a few seconds so that they can be able to hit the bleep button and whatever else. But BitTorrent Live, and some shows are already on it. The Twit Network's already on it. There's some others. This is a really cool idea because it is peer-to-peer television. That's literally what it is. Now, what it proves is what I've been saying for a long time. Now, granted, what BitTorrent, as in BitTorrent Inc., BitTorrent, the company, run by Bram Cohen, who, as far as I can tell, is a pretty good guy. BitTorrent Inc., none of their stuff is open source, unfortunately. I mean, the BitTorrent protocol, is a little bit different, but, everything else that they do, they have BitTorrent Sync. They have, what's their messaging service? Well, now I can't think of their messaging service. Blink? Is it? Maybe it's Blink, something like, or Bleep. Maybe it's Bleep. They have their messaging service. Of course, they have Project Maelstrom, which is an entire peer-to-peer internet. It's an internet it's a browser that doesn't use URLs. It uses magnet links. I have been saying for a while, I said BitTorrent is creating an entire alternative World Wide Web infrastructure. They're not necessarily making an entire alternative internet as to where there's they're laying out their own cables in line or anything. But, that could happen, or maybe they'd use Li-Fi or something like that. But they are creating, an entire alternative World Wide Web. That's really exciting. It sucks that it's not open source. I mean, that really sucks. And maybe one day that'll change. But now you effectively have a Netflix of sorts. Or not, more than a Netflix. You have live television over this protocol. You have, a superior cloud storage solution, even though, again, not open source. A lot of their projects admittedly need a little bit of work. Okay. Like Bleep, their messaging service needs a lot of work. Project Maelstrom, still in its early days. It needs some work, but the groundwork is there and it looks good. And so this is really, really exciting. That whole, my dream, one of my biggest dreams out of Sovryn Tech is to have, multiple internets. Okay. That's plural, internets. And BitTorrent is a company that's making that really happen. And it's not just like some kind of, you could say it's a walled garden. I would understand that. But it's something that is that operates in a completely different way, and it operates in a peer-to-peer way, which is really great, which, differentiates it from a lot of other people that are creating genuine walled gardens like Facebook, Google, and Verizon and others. So I thought that was really cool, with BitTorrent Live. All right, let's see. And just to prove my point that I've been theorizing for a while, that yes, BitTorrent they are going all the way. They are going to create an entirely new World Wide Web that people can use. And one day they are going to announce this, and you're going to see all these pieces in place that, most other tech shows don't even bother to fucking talk about. And then you're going to say, well, Golden Stallion, man, did you put that puzzle together nicely? So anyway, just saying. All right. Last bit of news. So I did a couple weeks ago, I did a Twitter poll. They have polls where you can ask questions or whatever. And I asked Sovryn Tech listeners, what operating systems do you use? And also people, I gave the option for people to, message me to let me know. It was, got great response, and I appreciate that. And the reason I asked the question was because, is it really worth my time to talk about Windows? And this is important because honestly, a lot of these BitTorrent technologies, strangely, many of them only work on Windows. So, or at least they start out on Windows. Their beta begins on Windows. That take that how you want it. And so I wanted to know, is it worth my time to talk about Windows stuff? Because Windows isn't open source. Microsoft has done very ugly shit, in the past few months, including, their update cycle with Windows 10, forcing that upon people, which is just insane. The bullshit they pulled with OneDrive. Of course, I ranted about that to no end. Where they removed, people initially were given unlimited storage, and then they said, "Oh no, actually, we're going to give you 1 terabyte." And you're a bunch of abusers, which you can't abuse when you're using something as advertised. That's not abuse. Whatever. So I asked the question, and come to find out, most of the listeners of this show, or at least over half of the listeners of this show, use Windows. So there, it's worth my while, to talk about, and something that gets released for Windows, or to talk about Microsoft here and there. The second most used was Ubuntu, or Linux. Anyway, I kind of put those together, and that was a substantial amount. And then, there was some OS, Mac OS. It's not OS 10 anymore. Mac OS users as well. But largely it was Linux and Windows. So, there you go. If you wonder why does, somebody that's so into, open source and all of this talk about Windows, well, a large part of my audience uses it. So there it is. It's the backbone of their computer world. And I end up not having, I shouldn't say have to, no one's put a gun to my head. But for some of the business that I do, yes, a Windows laptop is needed to do that business. And so I do use one. All right. Now let's finally get into the main story. A lot of random access there. And actually I'll put the question to you. If you want to get in touch with me, whatever way you want to, contact.zog.ninja. If you just want to let me know on Twitter, if you think the random access is ever too long, let me know. I'm just curious. I'm curious about your listening habits to some degree. And if you want to just use the contact form at zog.ninja, that'll keep you completely anonymous. I really don't, I don't want your information. I don't even want your email address. I have no desire for that thing. Okay. I am not going to make a big list and sell it off to some company for thousands of dollars and give you some shitty ebook in place of that. Like some other people in the space that I roll and do. I'm not interested in that. Okay. But when I ask a question, I'd like to know. So anyway, all right, main story. Let's get into talking about Google I/O. Google I/O was, this was for 2016. This was probably the biggest one I've seen in maybe 3 years. 2013 was maybe the last large one. That's where Larry Page did that kind of creepy speech, with the entire planet behind him that I thought was a little odd. But Google I/O 2016 was, they didn't, so here's what's weird. They didn't really release anything at all. Like, it was all just saying, this is what's coming. This is what's coming. And you got to feel, I'm annoyed by that. One of the things I love that Apple would do is that, like, when Steve Jobs Tim Cook will, in his very boring way, will often do this as well. When they talk about a new product, they'll say, and it's available on our store right now. I like that. Don't reveal the hand until it's, you know what I mean? Like, I get it. That's the way to do things, in my opinion. But Google, everything that they talked about is all coming into the future. And there was no new, other than the Google Home, there was really no new hardware announced. There's the VR stuff. We'll talk about that. But there wasn't like a new phone announced. There wasn't a new tablet announced, which I was expecting a new tablet to get announced because the Nexus 9 was taken down from the Google store. And there was already talk that HTC was working on a successor to the Nexus 9. So it's kind of weird that there is no premium, tablet. There's the Pixel C, I guess, right? Which that thing's kind of an odd monstrosity. But maybe it's all was an effort to just get people to buy the Pixel C. But yeah, other than the Pixel C, there's no other real tablet out there from Google, which is, there's no Nexus tablet. Which is kind of odd. And because, for the past few years, it hasn't been that way. You've always had a Nexus 7 or a Nexus 10 or something like that. You've always had some kind of an iPad competitor, as to where the Pixel C isn't an iPad competitor in the sense that what's the iPad that most people own? Oh, the iPad's so popular. Well, which one do people own? The most owned iPad is the iPad 2. So there's no Nexus device out there that directly competes with the likes of the iPad 2. The Pixel C obviously competes with the iPad Pro. And of course, both of those products, the iPad Pro and the Pixel C, are absolute, unabashed copies of Microsoft Surface. They're copies. They're not innovations at all. And that goes to say a little more about, speaking of innovation, that goes to say a lot more of what Google I/O 2016, kind of showed to me, is that this is a company that has no innovations. None. They've stopped innovating. It's over for them. It is a has-been company. That is I got that message from Apple as well, quite frankly. And Microsoft, the Surface Book was very cool, and like the way they presented everything was really great. But they've definitely backpedaled on their innovation as well, as to where they were for a brief moment with Satya Nadella. We're starting to really actually begin to innovate. It's just a company that's pivoting. But so a lot of these companies don't innovate. Amazon has innovated. There was one interesting thing out of Google I/O that I thought was positive. I'll save that for last and on a high note. So let's talk about Google Home. I already mentioned it briefly. The idea is it is a competitor. And like I said, kudos to Google for admitting that Amazon created an entire new category. And for, saying Amazon's name. Apple just would never, ever do that. Apple's like Disney, to where, they never credit the writers, or the original creators or the original works. They just pretend that they invented it all, which, fuck them. So I'll give Google the credit for that. Google Home it's just like the Echo in many ways, where it's a standalone little device. And as far as I know, it only allows for one account. Like you can log in with your Google account. And this is where the device shines in a conventional sense, because it allows you to interact with everything you have in Google, which in the digital sense is substantial. Your Gmail, not that anybody uses Google Plus, even the new Google Spaces, which I'll talk about in a minute. All of these different Google products that you use, Google Docs, whatever, all of that could get interact, in your calendar, of course, all of that can interact, with Google Home. That is, that's a winning recipe, I'll admit. And there's Google fanboys that are going to completely jump on that, and take advantage of it. Now, myself, Google Home, and, which is all part of IoT, and I'm sure Google Home will connect to various IoT products, as well to some degree. It was interesting. Nothing, Nest was not mentioned at all at Google I/O. That's probably because Nest is not making any money, and, it's going to get consumed somehow into this whole new Google Home branding. This is definitely, Google Home is an IoT device. It is an Internet of Targets. I'm sorry. Internet of shit. Internet of Things. Sorry. It is an Internet of Things device. So you would think that it would be branded as a Nest device, but I think Nest has such negative, baggage, marketing baggage going with it now, that they've strayed away from it. So it's Google Home. Now there will probably be a bunch of new products that will work with the ecosystem of Google Home, physical devices. And yeah, it does, I'll admit it, just like I think Alexa's redundant, but people love it. Google Home seems particularly redundant, in my opinion. First off, because it cannot provide the real world, the meat space advantages, like I said earlier, that the Amazon Echo does. At least it can't do that right now, and it's years behind to even be able to do that. Also, I didn't see anything that really said it's just that much better, than the Amazon Echo. That I don't think it has enough to really differentiate it. And Google doesn't, there's Google fanboys out there, but it's not the same, really rabidness when Apple releases something and then just plenty of people buy it just because it says Apple on it, even if it's an incredibly inferior product, like, say, the Apple TV. In comparison, to anything else out there, like the Shield TV blows away the Apple TV, 10-1. I think anybody would admit to that. So I don't get it. And also, I hate the fact that, I don't trust Amazon Echo or, Google Home. These are effectively constantly plugged in, or, some of them are portable, microphones that are just listening at all times. And I think, and there was recently, Someone actually, I think a reporter questioned a representative of the FBI, are you using the Amazon Echo or whatever to listen into people? And he said he couldn't confirm or deny it. I mean, that, in government parlance, that's admitting that you use it. Really. So you're putting a giant spy device in your in your home, but that's also, I mean, and a lot of people bring that point up, and then of course the immediate response is, well, you have a smartphone, don't you? That's the same deal. Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't argue that point, but that also shows the redundancy of Google Home. Is that apparently it's all. Google Home is just this little hardware cylinder, whatever, that is supposed to, be Google Now in your house. Well, you already have Google Now on your phone, all the time. And most people, keep their phones charged and all of this. I really see it as a redundant device. I think people are going to find it to be that as well, because it does not offer those meat space advantages and those lower prices that, that the Amazon Echo does. So I don't think this is a winner, but it is also, this was also kind of the premier product to show off what's called Google Assistant, which I think this is sort of a rebranded Google Now, and it's definitely designed to take on Siri, Cortana, and Alexa, and nothing really exciting here. It's Google Now with with a better voice interface. That's more or less the gist that I got out of it. Again, none of this stuff is in the real world. So, Google can say whatever it wants, about, that this product does this and does this and does this. Until people are actually using it, you gotta kind of question how that's all going to roll out. So Google Assistant, nothing exciting there. I mean, yeah, it's an AI. It's supposed to be really good at search and blah, blah, blah. But yeah, not blowing up my skirt in any way. And I don't really care for these digital assistants anyway. Now, perhaps the most, for a lot of people, the most quote unquote exciting thing that was talked about were two new messaging apps. That is Allo, ALLO, and Duo. Allo is a text, messaging service, and Duo is a video messaging, or a video call, and I assume audio as well. I would assume that you could just do audio, you don't have to do video, but it's a FaceTime competitor effectively. These were two of the big announcements. Google Assistant, first we'll start off with Allo. Google Assistant works directly with Allo, apparently. However, now this is where things get weird. Okay. And initially, with both of these, with Allo and Duo, now Hangouts can do can do most of what these two services, were designed to do. They can do the video calls and the text messaging and all of that. So it's a good bet that Hangouts is dead. They're saying it's not, but it might as well be, right? Because once these come out, once Allo and Duo come out, everybody's going to want to get on the new hotness, as it were, and that's going to be gone. Now, also, Google Spaces came out, which this is kind of it really looked a lot like, it looked kind of like Trello, like it was kind of trying to be a Trello. It's this group, and it looks kind of like Facebook groups, where it's this group sort of messaging and cooperation service. And that rolled out before Google I/O. I've tried it out. You can only max out like 500 people in Google Spaces. By and large, I didn't see anything there that really excited me, or, I guess, if you're working with smaller groups, it could, do a good job. And it is easy to make spaces within it. It's like creating little channels, but I don't know, it didn't really excite me with Google Spaces. However, it is technically, kind of a messaging service. Now, so here's the thing. So Google announced Allo, Duo, and Spaces, let's just say all last week. And which is shocking because, and we talked about this on Sovereign Tech over 100 episodes ago, where there was Project Babel. And Project Babel, or Project Babel, depending on, how you want to say it, and they are very different terms. But Project Babel by Google was supposed to be this unification of all of their different messaging services, because they said, yeah, we've got a huge problem. We have voice, we have Gtalk, we have this, we have that, all these different disparate services. We want it all to make it simplified and put it all into one. And that was supposed to be Hangouts. Like, how even Hangouts had Google Voice integration and all of this. And so they recognized the problem they had with all these disparate services. And they tried to bring it all together. Obviously, it failed. I mean, people have been complaining about Hangouts effectively since its inception. And now, now Google's going the exact opposite direction by creating a bunch of new messaging services. I mean, this is a company, again, that's really kind of lost its mind. They've lost their direction. They don't know where they're going. And with Allo, I'll break into Allo a little bit more here. Allo allows for, of course, stickers, all this different stuff, blah, blah, blah. And it allows for Google Assistant to kind of help you with recommendations and to, like maybe input things or find things that you're trying to say based upon, your calendar and whatever else in text, in a chat that you're having through Allo. But, I can see the use for that. I don't know that that's really going to take off because it's effectively a bot. Google Assistant is acting as a bot, and Facebook Messenger, people are already revolting against the bots because these things are fucking annoying. Maybe Google's won't be annoying, but I don't know. As it stands right now, people are not getting very excited over these bots. Now, if they're doing something like, was it Xiaoxi? Is that the one by Microsoft where, it kind of acts like the AI from her? Maybe that would be a little bit different, but as I understand it, that's not how Google Assistant is going to be working. You're not going to have like these conversations with it, or these full-on conversations, and it'll respond to you kind of like Xiaoxi does, which we talked about Xiaoxi when there was the episode about Microsoft's Tay chatbot, which, well, you saw where that went. So now Allo also allows for, and this was kind of the big shocker for a lot of people, is that they were working with Open Whisper Systems. They were working with Moxie Marlinspike to put in the Signal protocol into Allo. Now, after a fact, like that's great. I'm glad because the Signal protocol, the Axolotl protocol, that's great. It's one of the best encryption schemes we've got. Awesome. I'm glad you're putting that in there. But then you come to find out that if you want to use Google Assistant with Allo, you cannot have that encryption turn on, as I understand it. And also, that encryption, that beautiful, wonderful, and I mean that, end-to-end encryption is not turned on by default. As to where, and I don't want to give Facebook any credit, with WhatsApp, it was turned on by default. It's all bullshit because there is such a thing as what's called the tyranny of the default, that people will only use, like default settings or default software and what's there. And that can be a problem. I mean, there's advantages to default software, but, that aside, that's a real problem because most people aren't going to take the time to go and turn that on. Why even promote it if it's not automatically turned on? And this really highlights the problem with Google, the company overall, is that encryption is antithetical, like actual encryption that you control that hides stuff from Google's servers, which is what the Signal protocol does. It's end-to-end encryption. The server doesn't know what it is. It stands in stark contrast to Google's entire business model. They cannot survive in a world with encryption with end-to-end encryption. Long ago talked about that on Sovryn Tech, and I got a lot of shit for it because people said, oh, no, Google wants to do that. They can't. And I think the fact that it's not turned on by this great encryption is not turned on by default in Allo is proof that they can't. They need your information to survive. And I say starve them. Starve them of that shit. If you're going to use Allo, turn that end-to-end encryption on and fuck Google Assistant. Don't bother with that crap. So that's garbage. Now, flip side of Allo, there's Allo. I don't recommend it. If you want to use the Signal protocol, just fucking use Signal. Because, and Allo is, some people asked, they were concerned about Signal running off of phone numbers. And we talked about that. They use phone numbers because it's an easy verification system. Allo will also use phone numbers. It does not use usernames, as I understand, as they have talked about it. But they've Google after the first day of I/O, they've kind of gone back and forth on various things. Anyway, so now with Duo, which is this video service, kind of a Skype competitor of sorts, that apparently is completely end-to-end encrypted, and I assume that they are also using the Signal protocol for that, kind of like Red Phone or whatever. They are saying is end-to-end encrypted. Of course, FaceTime is also end-to-end encrypted, but it's not open source encryption, so that's debatable. How encrypted it is. So Duo is a little bit better off. It is encrypted by default. Good. That's great. And also, Red Phone doesn't allow for video, does it? I don't think so. Anyway, I rarely ever use that stuff. But the interesting thing with Duo is there's a new feature in that to where when somebody calls, and this is going to get strange, when somebody calls you, you will see them for a few seconds. Like before they start the phone, or, before you pick up, like you kind of see, it's sort of like these video answering services on your door. Like, or not video answer. I mean, yeah, those exist with like, was it the Ring doorbell service or whatever, or Ring door, blah, blah. Okay. The idea is that it's sort of like looking, somebody knocks on your door and you can look through, the little peephole to see who's there. And that is apparently how this will work, is that for a few seconds, as the person who is calling you with Duo, you will be able to see them for a few seconds there. Now, this is a mistake, in my opinion, and hopefully this is a feature that can get turned off, because I could picture a lot of people doing a lot of really wacky shit with that, and you are in many ways forced to see it. That's why I say hopefully it's something that can get turned off, because I mean I could think of all kinds of crazy ways that I would troll people, using this, to call somebody and doing just all kinds of horrendous things. So I think that's kind of dumb. If you want to understand that service more, of course, I mean, there's plenty of write-ups about Google I/O on the internet right now. So that's Duo, and I mentioned Spaces, and we talked about Allo. All of that, I'm baffled by Google's move to suddenly create a shit ton more different messaging services when their plan was to unify all of them. This stands in absolute contrast to that. And Hangouts might still exist as like a YouTube Live service of some sort, but even then, I think it's just going to end up becoming YouTube Live, instead of Hangouts, particularly. So, and the other thing too that I want to bring up is that I've mentioned this a few times, and I have to use it for various business reasons. But the Line messenger from the Japanese company Line, who also now end-to-end encrypts at least their chat messages, and they allow you to delete messages. That was another thing too, is that Allo allows for kind of like what Telegram and Wicker and those other ones do, where you can delete the message. And maybe you can set time limits on all that, which that's fine. Of course, unfortunately, if it's stored in Google servers, it wasn't end-to-end encrypted by default as it should be. Yeah, maybe that will, it's not really going to get deleted. It's like Snapchat. No, your Snapchats are not. Yes, they're deleted on your phone. They're deleted from the average person being able to see them, but it's a pretty good bet that Snapchat's holding on to them. Anyway, so Line Messenger can do everything all in one unified little app that Google is trying to do right now. I mean, they're not using the Signal protocol for encryption. I grant you that. But you can do encrypted texting. There's stickers. You can do video calls. You can do voice calls. Hell, you can even do Google Spaces. They have groups built into Line. It's funny. Facebook, I said this before on Sovereign Tech, but every company, as far as their messaging platforms go, are copying Line and WeChat all the way. Facebook's copying them. I mean, Southeast Asia, way ahead of the curve. Japan, way ahead of the curve, as usual, as far as, technologies go. Yeah, like, I don't know why no one else is bringing that up. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with making copycat products. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. I'm just saying, if the services already existed and if the market signal supposedly exists where people want this sort of stuff, why aren't they using the previously existent services? Oh, nobody talked about it? Oh, I see. So you just wait to listen to your Google and Apple overlords before you do something. Got it. No, I get it. Totally understand. Anyway, boy, a lot of other stuff to talk about. Android N, they talked a little bit about that. Nothing necessarily exciting there. I do want to talk about, real quick, Android Wear 2.0. This was talked about. The major exciting thing here is that they said that now Android Wear apps, it exists within the developer console to make Android Wear apps act completely independently of the smartphone. Yes! About time. I've said I've wanted this. I was like, look, I don't want a watch, a wearable that has to connect to my smartphone. Okay, I'm all for a wearable that replaces my smartphone entirely. And no one's seen, except for the LG Watch Urbane second edition LTE. Yes, that's the name of it. And all the scandal around that. You can listen to old episodes of Sovryn Tech to find out about that. That was kind of going in that direction. Galaxy Gear devices have kind of gone in that direction to where they, these watches have their own SIM cards and all of this. Now, finally, and way ahead, I think, of what is it? Watch OS? Is that what Apple calls theirs? For the Apple Watch. Now we have where apps can run completely independently on the smartphone, on the smartwatch, on the wearable. Awesome. Great. This was good. I am totally on board with that. So good for Android Wear 2.0. That was the real positive announcement. I thought. Another positive announcement was Daydream. Now, Daydream is not a reference to the old Android screensaver that could come up. Daydream is now the new VR platform based around Android. And this is interesting. So now, and I'll say this right out of the gate, if you are needing a new smartphone, either buy a really cheap one, or and wait till the fall, or if you can, just wait until fall of 2016, because apparently, as I understand it, there are going to be Daydream certified phones, kind of like how there's Oculus certified, laptops and video cards and all this stuff, where you're guaranteed that it'll work with this new platform. And Daydream is going to be, I don't think it's going to replace Google Cardboard, but it's kind of going to be the next level up of Google Cardboard. That's how I understood it. And so, I am excited about that. Anything that makes this stuff more serious. Granted, I was expecting, and I'd written about this at the Dark Android blog at darkandroid.info. I was expecting, and a lot of people were expecting, based upon various notes and leaks, that there would be a independent, it's not smartphone based, but a completely independent Android virtual reality headset of some kind. That did not get announced. But what they did announce is that there are going to be, Google is going to be creating their own Gear VR. And other partners will be able to make this, and all of it will work with this Daydream platform that is going to be baked right into the operating system, right into Android. As to where Google Cardboard is kind of a separate app and it works on its own, Daydream is going to be right in there, and that's the way to do it. The interesting thing is that this Daydream platform, they also showed you what the controller would be. It's a headset, kind of like Gear VR, and you put your phone in it. And then there is something that looks suspiciously like a Wiimote from the Nintendo Wii. Now, this gets to my point about Nintendo, is that Nintendo released, like I said, they're the real innovators. Sometimes they're way too ahead of their time. The Wiimote, everybody's copying that. The Apple TV copied the Wiimote. And it's funny because people made fun of the Wii controller. They said, this is stupid. Nobody's going to use this. Well, apparently now it's the controller of the fucking future because every other big name company is using it. So you have the Wiimote, which is a great way to interact with, something being projected in front of you. And then also, remember the Virtual Boy from the 90s. This was a headset, a virtual reality headset that you strapped onto your head and that worked independently. That's exactly what they've created with the whole Daydream thing. So I'm excited about it. I'll admit it. I wish it wasn't Google, but I'm excited about it. But hey, they're all just copying Nintendo. I'll be back with more. All right, Sovryn, it's that time where I tell you about, look, if you are serious about cold storage, if you are serious about decentralization, if you are serious about securing your goods, I want to implore you to get your hands on some precious metals. Okay, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, whatever, coins, bars, whatever. Get your hands on it, and I want you to do it through the absolute best in the world. And we're talking about how fast Amazon can get stuff to you. I'm telling you, this company could get things to me faster than Amazon could ever dream of in New Hampshire. Roberts & Roberts Brokerage. This is Tim Fry. This guy is full on freedom lover all the way. Loves Bitcoin too. If you want to get it with some Bitcoin, he prefers Bitcoin at Roberts & Roberts. This is one of the best businesses on the planet today, in my opinion. You want to get your hands on it. Gold.zog.ninja. That's the website. Okay. Or you can go to rrbi.co and just let him know that the Golden Stallion tell you. Believe me, Tim Fry will know who you're talking about. He's a fan of the show. Roberts & Roberts, they've been in business. It's been in business for over 40 years. Tim Fry's been running for a good long while. He is the man. You want to be buying from him. He's going to make sure you get taken care of. Okay. Head over to gold.zog.ninja. Decentralize your wealth. Get some real cold storage. It doesn't get any colder than gold and silver, baby. Now, let's get back to some Sovryn Tech, and thank you to Robertson Roberts Brokerage for supporting and sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Pixel, I'm being chased by assassin bots. I need an exit. Pixel!
Brian Sovryn, come with me if you want to leave.
Who are you?
I'm Adelaide. I'll tell you more later. Get in the vehicle.
Get in a car with a scantily clad and beautiful woman? Guess it's been my first choice before. Let's go.
First choice.
It is time for First Choice, where I cover the stories that get sent in to me through the various channels available. Of course, go to contact.zog.ninja to find those channels. And the story that I'm going to do this week that somebody sent in, and it's a great one, it actually dovetails pretty nicely off of what we were just talking about with, how do you interface with a lot of this technology? Daydream is definitely going to be, and they showed some mock-ups of what Daydream looks like, and it looks pretty cool. Like the whole OS, it looks very similar to, we hadn't talked about this in a long time, but Mozilla came out with like a Firefox VR, where like a VR web browser, and it seems to work a lot like that. And they're already ready. They're going to be releasing YouTube, VR and all this stuff, all that's going to work with Daydream. So again, if you're looking for a new smartphone, if you're excited about virtual reality, hold out for these Daydream certified phones. Don't grab something right now, or if you do, make sure it's really inexpensive. Don't spend a ton of money on it. But anyway, this is a story from Recode, and it's kind of a shocking headline. It's sort of short, so I'm going to go through the whole thing, and then I want to comment on it because I think there's some real issues here. And it's, someday you'll have no screens in your life. The stuff on our desks and in our pockets is disappearing. In 20 years, it'll be gone. And this is by David Bazuski, just from actually May 17th, so this is pretty fresh. Let's read it. Dozens of everyday office tools have been absorbed since the, quote-unquote absorbed, since the 1970s, including calendars, Rolodexes, dictionaries, maps, books, media players, file cabinets, fax machines, and wired phones. Most legacy office devices are already commonly emulated with a web-connected smartphone or laptop. What's left in the toolbox of a typical tech worker is a laptop with charger, smartphone, earbuds, wallet, or purse and keys. And Stallion breaking in, yes, that's almost exactly what I keep in my man bag, or my merce, my man purse. And let's keep reading. This disappearing act has been stealthily underway since the advent of the PC. It will soon be possible to walk into a Starbucks without a phone or laptop and browse the web, video chat with friends, or edit a spreadsheet. By the mid-2020s, so we got some prediction going on here. By the mid-2020s, your wallet, keys, and laptop brick will no longer be needed. Keys will be absorbed into smartphones as early as 2017, when Volvo offers vehicles that can be opened and started with a phone. This feature should be available in most vehicles by 2025. The laptop charging brick is quietly being left at home. I'm going to stop for a second here, because I want to touch on some of this one by one. The whole key thing, sorry, that's a recipe for your car getting stolen. In fact, the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy's dad recently purchased a car, and he told them, because he had the option to get one where it didn't, where it had keyless entry, not just keyless entry, but like you didn't need the key at all. And he said, no. I know what happens, with cars that don't have the keys. You give me a key. And kudos to him. Great guy. I really appreciated that. This is a guy, from a bit of an older generation, and he appreciated and understood, what exactly is going on today. So the idea of keyless entry is crap. Now, granted, locks in general, outside of the cars, okay, say with home locks and all of this stuff, locks really only keep out honest people. That's the truth. But I certainly am not prepared to have, all my locking mechanisms, be be done through, say through my watch and, or, through a wearable, or being done, without keys and all this. I think that's unnecessary technology, and it's not, well, I mean, you can imagine that your locks are going to somehow get controlled and connected to the cloud in some way. And then this is just going to be another way that people track you. Oh, he went into his house at this time. Oh, he started his car at this time, blah, blah, blah. And I think that that's a complete unnecessary recipe for privacy disaster. There's no point to that. I mean, if you want to set up something like locally, but again, nobody's offering you that sort of thing because they know the real money is in collecting your data and selling that off to advertisers, or in, allowing them to get purchased by Google so that they can increase, the data profile they have of everybody on the planet. That's really about, nobody really gives a shit about the consumer anymore. So I think that's a terrible idea. It may come to fruition. This writer might be right. But that's certainly not a future that excites me in any way. So anyway, keys still need to be a thing. Let's read on here. The laptop charging brick is quietly being left at home as the battery life of laptops has increased over the past 15 years. Driven by advances in mobile technology, top laptops are pushing the magic 12-hour battery life zone. Now, I'll stop there on that one. That's true. Like, that part's true. In fact, the laptop that recently, that a Sovryn Tech listener very kindly, equipped me with, this thing, I can get 16 hours on this thing. Granted, it's not a powerhouse. I'll talk more about it during the climax. Okay. But 16 fucking hours. That's insane. And I'm recording the podcast on it right now. Woo! So that part's true. Fine. You leave the brick at home. And honestly, the bricks are so small these days. The cords are bigger than the bricks. Whatever. I don't think that means much to me. But anyway, reading on. And the two main items in our wallets, a driver's license and credit card, will soon be available on our smartphones. Iowa has piloted a project to offer smartphone driver's licenses, and Visa, MasterCard, Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and Google Wallet are engaged in the battle for digital smartphone payments everywhere. Of course, not a shock, Rico didn't care to mention Bitcoin, or maybe something like Zcash, which I'm very excited about and talked about many times on this show. Okay, so the driver's license thing, I don't think people need to have IDs. So fuck it. That's fine that doesn't need to be in a wallet. Like, that's the future I want to go to, not because it's all done on my phone, but because who gives a shit? Like, I don't think people need to have IDs. And boy, if you've never, just listen back to Sovryn Tech episodes, Tyranny of Identity and all that. All right. As far as the wallet thing, digital payments are interesting. I still think there's something to be said for losing the anonymity that, real cash offers you, and that physical money kind of offers you. And I can't say this enough. It's really been shown that by the fact that a lot of companies, Google, Apple, and others, have retroactively added offline features to all of their apps, the fact is I don't think it's going to roll out fast enough, certainly not in the next 20 years, to where there is just, constant connection to like this one centralized place where, you could buy things from. Now, maybe if it's a cryptocurrency of some kind, maybe that could work because there'd be some kind of, peer-to-peer, some mesh networking, in all these various places. And I know there's people that are excited. They should say that the wallet shouldn't exist. Everything should be in the smartphone. And if you want that, I get it. But it's probably going to be the future. They're probably right that it's going to be the future. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's a good thing, or that it's going to work as advertised. And, it's just going to take a couple times where somebody can't pay to get off of a train or something, or whatever the case may be, or they can't buy food in their favorite little, hole in the wall restaurant, which I love hole in the wall restaurants. That's going to be, that's going to become an issue. I don't know how I feel about that. And that's something too. Like, I think Google kind of had the right idea with how to do this, because they created that physical Google Wallet card that they canceled. And, I didn't even get into that. All right. I'm going to step back a little second, because I didn't even get to bring this up, is that all these new services that Google announced and much of which is relevant actually to this story. You know, the messaging services, the wallet services, the pay services, and all that. The track record that Google has of canceling services, I wouldn't use one of their messaging services for the life of me because I'd be afraid that eventually it would just go away, you know, inside of a year or two. I mean, Hangouts is already practically dead anyways. So that's a problem here. This speaks to a lot of this stuff because a lot of this is about the appification of physical things that you have. You know, these startups that do a lot of this appification, okay, or digitizing, whatever, you know, they come and go. You know, you think about Revolve, you know, speaking of Google, the Revolve product that Nest bought out and then Google bought out Nest. We talked about this. You know, there's a whole bunch of people where their entire lock systems, you know, we're just talking about locks with this story, you know, where entire lock systems don't work anymore because Google stopped supporting the Revolve hub, you know, IoT hub, and they didn't open source it, which is what they should have done. So, I mean, you got a huge problem here when this stuff relies upon connecting to the cloud. And that's a lot of the future that this writer is describing. I mean, this is a real issue. I don't trust Google service. I don't trust Google Spaces. I don't trust any of the new shit that they talked about other than perhaps the VR, but that's only because other manufacturers are in on the game like LG and Samsung. All right, let's read on. The coming age of smart glasses. In the 2030s, laptops, smartphones, and earbuds will coalesce into smart glasses. Unlike Google Glass, which was a display peripheral, smart glasses will replace your smartphone. Two major technical breakthroughs will power smart glasses, those being augmented reality displays and finger tracking. Innovations in miniaturization and battery life will provide hundreds of times the computing power of your current smartphone, and onboard earbuds will be embedded in the temples. Can I not? Reading on. The AR, or augmented reality display in smart glasses, will overlay text, images, and full 3D scenes directly on one's field of view. Anything we can view on a monitor today will be available in 3D on smart glasses. When sitting in our circa early 2030s Starbucks, we will bring up a virtual high-resolution monitor, and it will look and seem real. Accelerometers and motion tracking will quote-unquote lock our virtual monitor to the table. AR displays will be able to create any virtual work surface we desire. A standard configuration might be a virtual 3-monitor display along with graphics tablet on the table. Smart glasses will integrate finger tracking as currently demonstrated by Xbox Kinect and Leap Motion, eliminating the need for a keyboard or mouse. Smart glasses will project a virtual keyboard on any surface. The finger tracking in our smart glasses will then recognize virtual key presses, most likely with tactile sound feedback. We have already seen a similar migration from tactile mobile keyboards like BlackBerry to touchscreens, as in like iOS and Android. When the augmented reality display in smart glasses is coupled with finger tracking and a virtual keyboard, laptops and smartphones will no longer be needed. Now, I want to comment on that, but there's just one last little bit to the story, and it's titled No More Screens. Some will choose not to wear smart glasses for appearance reasons. Not to worry, because in the late 2040s, now he's going in 40 years in the future. Well, no, just a little over 20. Smart glasses will be replaced with AR contact lenses. These will be coupled to a small CPU/power chip that can be surgically embedded in the upper arm. Earbuds will be available as permanent embeds as well, making it possible to interact online at any place, anytime with no peripherals. Google's Magic Leap and Microsoft's HoloLens are both making big pushes into AR displays. Their early efforts will be clumsy, somewhat akin to a compact computer of the 1980s. But the prize is big. The winner of the AR display wars will ultimately control the future of the screen and usher in a new era where the only screens are virtual. Now, this is somewhat distinct from another concept that we've talked about in the past called Zero UI, which has kind of multiple different terms that people have used that in different ways. Zero UI, as I understand it right now, means not that there's no screen, but that you don't do anything. Like you don't interact. The app just kind of does it all for you. And it can mean that, you just talk to it. There's no actual interface to be had there. As to where this is talking about that there is an interface, and you could still, like, there's tactile contact where you could have a virtual keyboard and all this stuff. And I'll give the writer credit for at least admitting that, unlike a lot of people in Silicon Valley who are positively asinine for thinking that the keyboard will no longer be necessary. That's just ridiculous. That's bullshit. Even though, some people talk about, there's Project Eve, which is a programming language that is based around objects and not necessarily around, characters and lines of code, but just it's like putting together like Legos. That, I suppose, could exist in a keyboardless world, and you could still do programming. But I think, there's something here. Some of this will be true. I don't like the idea of shit getting implanted on me. Really not cool with that. But there's a greater point I think that might get missed here. And that is, and this is only true really since the smartphone. I think with laptops, something with larger screens and computers and all that, this isn't necessarily so. But I think someone needs to think about the children. Okay? Because what's going to happen in this future is, what are kids like? If adults are models for children, in their behaviors and how to interact with the world, what exactly are they going to learn? I mean, are we going to be jamming this stuff into kid? Shouldn't a kid have a choice to whether or not they're going to have something implanted into their temples? Yeah, I think maybe they should. So what exactly are kids going to see their parents doing all day? It's going to be a very odd world. And I question how, a developing human mind will interact with reality when no one is really doing, they're doing things, but they're not really doing anything. A kid, and I'm not saying this is a healthy thing for a kid to see, a kid sees that their parent is in front of a television. Okay. All the time. Not the best model behavior, perhaps, or in front of a screen. One of the best arguments I ever heard for voice controls, voice activated controls is, and this is interesting, is the idea, actually it was Gina Trapani, I think she was talking on This Week in Google, and she said that she loves voice commands because then her child can understand what she's doing. The child gets an idea of what's going on. And I think you're going to lose all of that when you go to this, screenless future. And I have real concerns over this. And a lot of people talk about, there's people who talk about when you're raising kids that you don't let them near a screen for 2 years. Well, fuck, we're not even going to, fuck the screen. We're just going to put smart glasses on little Johnny. And, that's how he's going to interact with the world. But how is he going to have any, I wonder about their concept of reality, how that's all going to work. These are huge questions. You can't just go out there and say, well, everything's going to be, screenless and all this stuff. Well, yeah, it can work because people knew what it's like to do things physically without it. Maybe in that sense, it's okay. But when you're talking about people that have never done any of this stuff before, I worry a lot, about how the human mind develops in an AR situation. It should not replace the way that we interact, with the bulk of what we do, in my opinion. I really find that to be questionable. Or it should be a later part of life. It's so funny. You talk about, giving kids tablets and all this stuff, and Amazon and Apple. It's like, oh yeah, this tablet's for your kid and all this stuff. When Bezos and Steve Jobs in particular never let their kids touch smartphones or tablets. Why is that? Is it because they know something about what I'm hinting at here? I don't like this idea of the screenless future. It has a place, but it shouldn't be the norm.
Are you tired of theorists talking about the free market as a cure-all for every problem without firsthand experience of how the market actually works?
Well, the Free Coast Financial Radio app gives you wall-to-wall shows by hosts who not only understand the market,
but tell you how they make money in a variety of investment and artistic endeavors.
The Free Coast Financial Radio app for Android is 24/7 streaming audio content on finance, liberty, and technology from the coastal region of New Hampshire.
Because there's a lot more to New Hampshire than just Keene. Free Coast Financial Radio. Useful information, compelling personalities, and superior audio quality.
The Free Coast Financial Radio app is covered by the BIPCOT No-Gov license.
Go on the Google Play Store
or on Amazon
and search Free Coast, all one word.
And please rate and review.
Worms.
Whoa, hey, you want to slow down?
I don't do slow. I move fast.
Okay, well, so you're French.
Everyone in the future speaks French.
Wait. The future?
From 2099. Permanent Autonomous Zone, Osiris-1. You've been there.
Oh, this isn't happening. It only thinks it's happening. How do I know you're from Osiris 1?
RGP fingerprint Omega 746566666.
Okay, you're legit. Hey, really, be careful. You drive like you're playing a video game.
That is how you programmed me. Game Talk.
It is time for Game Talk, where I talk about games. Woo! And it allows the fun It allows the show to be a little fun here and there. So this week I was going to talk about something, and maybe I'll save it. Maybe it'll come out for Sex and Science Hour, which, boy, if you didn't hear episode 7 of Sex and Science Hour, get over to sexandsciencehour.com and give that thing a listen. Or you can just go to zog.ninja. Actually, I post the show there as well. But I was going to talk about Bang Fit, and that's bang.fit. And this is kind of a gamification of exercising and fucking. But I'll save that for another time. I do want to break into that because I think there's actually some really exciting things about it. So instead, because I kind of shortened the segment this week to fit in everything, talking about Google I/O, I want to talk about just a brief topic, and that is end-of-lifing games. Now, end-of-lifing products we talked about earlier, like with Revolve and some of that other stuff, companies usually don't do a good job, be it games or whatever, okay, to where if it's a game or if it's a product that relies on connecting to a server somewhere or the cloud, and again, there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. If it relies upon that and then that company goes out of business, gets bought out, whatever, just stops. It end-of-lifes whatever it's doing. What gets left to the consumer? In gaming, this wasn't a problem not long ago. In gaming, it used to be you spend $50, $60 on a cartridge, you pop it into your machine. That machine, in fact, the console itself never connects to anything. And so the game plays and away you go. And you could play, there's people that are still rocking their, I bring this example up all the time. I have a 40-year-old Atari 2600, the thing still rocks. I can still pop in Asteroids and go to town. There's people with NESs, Super Nintendos, whatever. The cartridges still play. The consoles still rock them. They still play them out. This is a problem today as to where, you have not just necessarily, because some people would say, well, those games are kind of basic and what the fuck, you can't, the features that you get by connecting to a server or by doing multiplayer and all this are just so awesome. Look, I don't want, to go back to the days when consoles didn't connect to the internet, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I get that. I understand that argument. However, the necessity for games to connect to servers or to the cloud does not revolve necessarily around game features. Now it has become a part of DRM. It has become a part of digital rights management. As in some games, and this is still true for a lot of games, like take the service Games for Windows Live, which Microsoft end-of-lifed, admittedly after like 5-6 years. I mean, or maybe even a decade. They gave it a good run. I'll give them that as to where, Google cancels stuff inside of like 6 months. Very different, but there's games that were available for that because you cannot log into Games for Windows Live because that server, that software's been shut down, that server's, turned off. You can't play the game anymore, regardless of how much money, and you could have spent $50 on it. It's done. It's over. Now, no company is guaranteed, no company is selling you games unless they explicitly say it with a guarantee that you will be able to play this for all eternity. Nobody would do that. And I understand that. Okay. But still one of the real promises of the computer age, we'll say, and of the internet age of the digital age, I guess, is that it would become consumer facing, not businesses pushing upon you whatever the fuck they want, and them giving you the narrative of what's good and, what makes a great car or what doesn't. The digital age was all about the consumer getting to choose and the consumer having actual control as long as you understood how to use it. And so that really, things have kind of come full circle as to where for a while in the 90s in particular, you did have total control over what you were doing. That is no longer true. Now people are very much slaves to the cloud. They are slaves to someone else's server. They are slaves, to all this, unless you choose to use, products that don't connect to that. But those are becoming slimmer and slimmer, fewer and fewer. But there is a right way, what the most popular concept of this, or the most popular implementation of games that have to connect to a server in the cloud are, MMOs, massive multiplayer online games, be it role-playing, shooters, whatever. And I get it that these games are not going to last forever. I understand that. And I mean, it's amazing that World of Warcraft has gone on for as long as it has. And already the numbers show, obviously that it's waning significantly. But I'll give a lot of credit to World of Warcraft. I mean, yeah, it's come out with new, expansion packs and all that, but it is a game that's operated on its own, for shy of a decade. I mean, with no, there's no World of Warcraft 2, there's none of this stuff. I think that's great. I really appreciate that they're standing the test of time. But some games haven't. And I have a problem with that because you will, some of these games require you spend $10 a month or however much a month, to be able to access it. And then once it's done, you don't have saved games that you can go back to. You have nothing. Like it effectively becomes, it evaporates into the ether. Now, again, I don't expect companies to make any kind of guarantees. It'd be great if they just open sourced everything. They gave people, all of the software to where they could run their own servers and they could play the game, as long as they had the technical knowledge, they could play it into infinity. That is the best way to do it. But there's another way to do it that maybe doesn't require that. Maybe, a company doesn't want to hand over their secret sauce, for, how they were able to solve latency and all of this stuff. And I wish they didn't feel that way, but I get it. I understand why they would. All right. And so they're not going to empower people to run their own servers. I understand that. DRM, I do not understand that. I think it's bullshit. It does more harm than good. And there's lots of proof of that. But the other way that you can do this, and I think this is really cool because not just the longtime game players, but all kinds of people really get to win and they really get to appreciate and enjoy what an MMO was at one point, or a game, whatever. And that is you create, and Sony's really good about this. Sony Entertainment Online, Sony Online Entertainment, right? SOE. They're really good about this. They make what are called memory books. And this is what I wish more companies would do. That end of life their games, because you don't have to actually, especially today in the digital world, you don't have to publish the book. You can just, make a PDF of it. And what they do is they've done this for a couple games and they just recently released the one, or maybe it wasn't recently. I recently found it. They recently released the one for Star Wars Galaxies, which is the original Star Wars MMO. It's not Old Republic. But I hope EA does this with Old Republic when eventually I imagine that game will get end of life. But they also did it the first time I experienced this, and maybe it was the first time that any company had done it, had created a memory book, was with the Matrix Online, which Sony also created, which I loved that game. And you can find this online. It's a memory book. You can download the PDF, and it pretty much tells you the entire story of what happened throughout the life of the MMO, because you have missions. I mean, it's just like World of Warcraft where there's missions or storylines and all this stuff. And it gives you all of that story. The Star Wars Galaxy memory book does the same thing. And maybe it gives you a bunch of nice screenshots from the game and all this stuff. It's a great way of encapsulating what something was, and it's a simple way of doing it. And I love that because, honestly, for a lot of games, like I love how on YouTube you can watch like game movies where somebody will just play through the game and they'll make it work, they'll edit it and they'll make it work out like it's a film. I love experiencing games that way. Sometimes I like games more for their story than I do for the actual gameplay. That's part of the reason that Zomia Offline Games, the mantra for Zomia Offline Games is story first, story forever. That's my game company. Because story is that's what I want out of a game. And so obviously that's what I do. Is concentrate on story. So these memory books, I'd love it if consumers kind of demanded this out of companies. It's just in these companies. I mean, obviously with a lot of these games, I mean, people are ponying up some serious cash. The least they can do is release, the storyline of the game in a really nice fashion, that stands for posterity. I think they're so cool. The Matrix one especially, like when you find out that Neo gets kind of reincarnated and he comes back as a woman. I thought that was awesome. Was it Sarah Edmonton or something like that? It's like an anagram of Thomas Anderson. That was awesome. So, but most people would never know that story if there wasn't either a Wikipedia entry, which the Wikipedia entry isn't that impressive, or if Sony didn't create this memory book that gets released. And if they want to publish it, all the better. If people want to hash out, $100 for this great hard, coffee book edition, cool, do it. So there are ways because I complain a lot about on Sovryn Tech that, wow, the way that these companies end of life anything, not just games, but products, whatever, it sucks. There are great ways that have already been done that at least soften the blow or allow it to really be appreciated forever. And that way, the coders and the writers of the game and all that, they can get appreciated forever. So memory books, let's keep doing that. Let's face it, the whole financial game, it's rigged. So why don't you get in on the game? Now, no guarantee of results here, but I'm telling you something that's really cool to check out. You want to get on this is Cool Trade. This is software made by an ex-Microsoft guy, just a brilliant guy, Ed Barsano. He put this all together. And I mean, this is one of those guys. He's got it going on with Cool Trade. Okay. This is software that runs it can run in its own stealth mode, that allows you to do trades on the stock market. And it's all automatic. It's just setting up a computer. You put it off to the side, of a room somewhere, and you just let it run. You let the software run in stealth mode so nobody on Wall Street knows what you're doing. And, it just keeps working on making money for you every day. That's what you want to get your hands on. Okay. Cool Trade. You want to check it out. Now, I got a great deal for Sovryn Tech listeners, okay? You go to smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn. That's smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn. And you can get a great deal on this whole, you're going to want to get in on this software. And also, I want you to check out, this deal is being provided by Pace Ellsworth, who's a great guy. He's been on Sovryn Tech before, might be on again. And just a real brilliant guy. He is a, liberty lover just like you, freedom, all the good stuff, okay? He is all about you taking advantage of the system. All right. And that's what Cool Trade's all about. But he's running the automation community there with Smart Market, and he does the Smart Market Show. You can check him out as well. I recommend doing that. But you can talk to Pace directly, smartmarketshow.com/Sovryn, and you can get hooked up with Cool Trade, and you can start taking advantage of the system and stop leaving it to all those fucks in Wall Street. All right. So get on it. It's exciting software/Sovryn. Now, let's get back to Sovryn Tech, and thanks so much to Cool Trade and Smart Market Show sponsoring Sovryn Tech. Right on. Pixel says it should be this panel.
We need to hack into the control center to shut down all of those assassin bots.
Well, you're the android. Can't you just jack in?
Oui, but the way I connect is more like a jack off.
Was that a joke?
Hacking is no joke.
Directly connecting certainly beats doing it with the keyboard.
You're notorious for your love of cyber sex.
Okay, now that was a joke. Just get hacking.
A quick hack solves everything. Hacksack.
It is time for Hacksack, where I talk issues of hacking and security. And this week, admittedly, this is a story that got sent in to me from a great Sovryn Tech listener. And I'm shocked that I'm actually going to be disagreeing with not the listener necessarily, but with the person that wrote it. And that person is Moxie Marlinspike. Now, we were just talking about him earlier because he is pretty much the creator of the Axolotl protocol, the Signal protocol, at Open Whisper Systems. And just a great guy. I'll tell you straight up, I'm not seeing eye to eye with him on what he wrote up here. And I want to read it. But again, even though I disagree with him, that doesn't mean that this is don't use Signal or anything like that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I don't really agree with kind of the direction that he's thinking here. So, and this has to do with Signal and kind of its future. And it's titled, the blog post is titled Reflections, the Ecosystem is Moving. Now you can read this for yourself. Just find episode 176 at zog.ninja. Show notes, it's right in there under Hacksack. At Open Whisper Systems, reading here, we've been developing open source, quote unquote, consumer facing software for the past 4 years. We want to share some of the things we've learned while doing it. As a software developer, I envy writers, musicians, and filmmakers. Unlike software, when they create something, it is really done forever. A recorded album can be just the same 20 years later, but software has to change. Software exists as part of an ecosystem, and the ecosystem is moving. The platform changes out from under it, the networks evolve, security threats and countermeasures are in constant shift, and the collective UX, or user experience language, rarely sits still. As more money, time, and focus has gone into the ecosystem, the faster the whole thing has begun to travel. Okay, now I want to stop real quick just on that aspect, because already I think there's a bit of a false premise. Like he's talking about the UX language and all this. Examples of that might be like Material or Holo, like that Google implements in Android. A lot of the user experience that improves is really all about not pleasing the consumer. It's about, or doing something because, for some like really great technical reason. It really just has to do with pleasing investors. They need to see some kind of improvement, or maybe it's a growth trick because you make something look prettier and suddenly people want to download it. There's not like an actual technical reason for the ecosystem to move that much. Okay. I mean, and this is, really the bottom line ecosystem is coding. And the proof that ecosystems don't move is how many people still write in C nonstop. It's not until like Swift and Rust come around that suddenly people start to shake things up a bit, or Java being so popular. I mean, I don't think the ecosystem has to move. That's kind of a false, I don't want to say dichotomy, but like that's a false premise, I think, right out of the gate with this write-up. But I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making things prettier. I'm just saying, let's be clear that the incentives for doing that in themselves are not consumer facing, in my opinion. Reading on, just proof positive. I think if you gave most people Windows 95, it does enough for them. They, you know what I mean? For the average person, for the average consumer, Windows, and I've said that's not new for me to say. I've said that on Sovereign Tech forever. Windows 95 is really operating system enough. The success of Chromebooks, which by the way, are now also allowing for the implementation of Android apps. The Play Store will be on Chrome OS, and now Chromebooks are outselling Macintosh computers. They're outselling Macs. Ooh, yeah. That shows people really don't need that much, or they don't want even that much. The market's speaking here. Reading on, all of this means that the set of expectations users have for social and communication features are evolving rapidly. Again, I think that's a false premise, but reading. Anyone building software today knows that it is not possible to stand still. One of the controversial things we did with Signal early on was to build it as an unfederated service. Nothing about any of the protocols were developed requires centralization. It's entirely possible to build a federated Signal protocol-based messenger, but I no longer believe that it is possible to build a competitive federated messenger at all. Now, federated is like emails, to where there's no central server. It can be implemented anywhere. You can do it yourself, blah, blah, blah. It's one of the things I really like. Like, I want things to be federated. IRC, and all of this. Yeah, let's federate all the things. Anyway, stuck in time, reading on. In some circles, this has not been a popular opinion. When someone recently asked me about federating an unrelated communication platform into the Signal network, I told them that I thought we'd be unlikely to ever federate with clients and servers we don't control. Their retort was, quote, "That's dumb. How far would the internet have gotten without interoperable protocols defined by third parties?" End quote. I thought about it. We got to the first production version of IP and have been trying for the past 20 years to switch to a second production version of IP with limited success. We got to HTTP version 1.1 in 1997 and have been IP Internet Protocol and have been stuck there until now. Likewise, SMTP, which is email, IRC, DNS, XMPP are all similarly frozen in time circa the late 1990s. To answer this question, that's how far the internet got. It got to the late 90s. That has taken us pretty far. But it's undeniable that once you federate your protocol, it becomes very difficult to make changes. And right now at the application level, things that stand still don't fare very well in a world where the ecosystem is moving. Now, I want to comment on all that because I love IRC. In fact, you can go to irc.zog.ninja and you can use an IRC channel. I'm there. All kinds of people are there. It's a good time. I love Usenet. I love XMPP. I love all of these things. And I don't agree with his. I'm going to comment on this part of the premise. And if you think it's wrong of me to not read the whole thing and stop in between, well, it's important to stop here and talk about this. Facebook would not be Facebook. And Facebook is becoming very much its messenger service, its messenger system, not just the news feed and all of that. Well, what was the Facebook Messenger originally built on? XMPP. These open standards, these federated ability, that any company can take and build into is what has created all of these megalithic companies, all these quote unquote successes. And I put that in quotes. Okay. Successes, to be there. is because of the fact that you have these technologies that are just so extensible and just so adaptable. So I don't buy it that somehow it's held the internet back. I don't think so. And I don't think that the internet is somehow going to reach something higher just because we start centralizing everything. I think, yes, there might be an ease of use that will come into play. People will be able to, I don't know, like all of their Google services can connect better or something like that because everything's centralized. Sure. But then also, that at the same time, that means that when one of these services, that if Google ever goes down, you lose every service you've got. You have nowhere else to go. So I'm not buying this. I'll keep reading. But the internet of the late 90s, we got that far because of genius men. And I'm not saying that Moxie wouldn't say that they're geniuses. Okay. But at the same time, like these technologies, they were genius because they were so forward thinking. And I don't think that their day is up. If anything, I always say this, technology is cyclical. Okay. Or it's not cyclical. It's a spiral. Technology is a spiral, as in it retraces its steps as it goes up, as it goes around in the cycle. Okay. We were mentioning earlier with the Daydream VR platform, Nintendo already did all of that. Okay. Just maybe people weren't ready for it. But now seemingly people are ready for it. They're on the spiral at the right spot. And so, technology is just going back to that original genius. So again, I'm really debating this premise that he has. I'll keep reading. Indeed, cannibalizing a federated application layer protocol into a centralized service is almost a sure recipe for a successful consumer product today. So he's admitting that. It's what Slack did with IRC, what Facebook did with email, and what WhatsApp has done with XMPP. In each case, the federated service is stuck in time while the centralized service is able to iterate into the modern world and beyond. So while it's nice that I'm able to host my own email, that's also the reason why my email isn't end-to-end encrypted and probably never will be. By contrast, WhatsApp was able to introduce end-to-end encryption to over 1 billion users with a single software update. So long as federation means stasis while centralization means movement, federated protocols are going to have trouble existing in a software climate that demands movement as it does today. Again, I think this whole thing's a false stallion breaking in. It's a false paradigm. You can do end-to-end encrypted email, and you can do it through the application itself. Google, 2014, they said they were going to do their end-to-end Gmail implementation, and they never released it. I don't think they never released it because it's not technically feasible. I think they never released it because, as we said earlier, Google needs to see what you're typing. They need to get your information. They have to have it. Encryption is antithetical to the business model of Google. So I think Moxie's off on this. Reading on. Early on, I thought we'd federate Signal once its velocity had subsided. Now I realize that things will probably never slow down, and if anything, the velocity of the entire landscape seems to be steadily increasing. XMPP is an example of a federated protocol that advertised itself as a quote-unquote living standard. Despite its capacity for protocol extensions, however, it's undeniable that XMPP still largely resembles a synchronous protocol with limited support for rich media, which can't realistically be deployed on mobile devices. If XMPP is so extensible, why haven't those extensions quickly brought it up to speed with the modern world? Well, if you use Chat Secure, you can see just how far XMPP can go, and it can go pretty far. That's me saying that. But anyway, I'll keep reading on. Like any federated protocol, extensions don't mean much unless everyone applies them. And that's an almost impossible task in a truly federated landscape. I'll keep reading, but there's another false paradigm. What we have instead is a complicated morass of XCPs that aren't consistently applied anywhere. The implications of that are severe because someone's choice to use an XMPP client or server that doesn't support video or some other arbitrary feature doesn't only affect them, it affects everyone who tries to communicate with them. It creates a climate of uncertainty, never knowing whether things will work or not. In the consumer space, fractured client support is often worse than no client support at all because consistency is incredibly important for creating a compelling user experience. Now, I'm going to stop him there again. Okay, and the reason I think that this argument's crap is, and with all due respect, Moxie, because I think you're great. Okay, but this is kind of crap because this is inferring that everybody wants to talk to everybody. When you look at how Facebook has been looking into implementing more group features when you have like Messenger that allows for groups, when you have Google Spaces, when you have Telegram putting in group features. When the big push, it seems, in a lot of these, even in Line, the Line Messenger now has groups and all this. When the big push is to work with small groups, that's because to get shit done, you work in small groups. Small groups, you don't need everybody to accept everything. You don't need this unifying standard for everybody to get shit done or to even enjoy life. In fact, as I talk about often on Sovryn Tech, the Dunbar number. People can't even handle communicating with that many people at once. Okay, so you just need your group to to kind of, you use smaller systems. I don't buy this idea that the entire planet needs WhatsApp. That's ridiculous. Especially to fulfill their life goals and their life's desires. They sure as hell don't need WhatsApp. They would do just fine with, a group messenger of some kind. That's federated at that. Anyway, all right, I'll keep reading. Let's see, compelling user experience. Okay, for example, even GitHub has problems with consistency and control right now. They introduced issue templates, but a number of third-party GitHub clients don't support them. So even after creating a thorough issue template for the Signal Android repository, we still get people who post, "It doesn't work, please help," because their client never even showed them the template. That makes me annoyed with GitHub, even though I use the official GitHub clients. It's a potential opportunity for a GitHub competitor and can display issue templates consistently. One potential benefit of federation is the ability to choose what provider gets access to your metadata. However, as someone who self-hosts my email, that has never felt particularly relevant, given that every email I send or receive seems to have Gmail on the other end of it anyway. Federated services always seem to coalesce under a provider that the bulk of people use, with a long tail of small, scattered self-hosting across the internet. That makes sense because running a reliable service isn't easy. But it's an outcome that is sadly the worst of both worlds. If anything, protecting metadata is going to require innovation in new protocols and software. Those changes are only likely to be possible in centralized environments with more control rather than less. Just as making the changes to consistently deploy end-to-end encryption in federated protocols like email has proved difficult, we're more likely to see the emergence of enhanced metadata protection in centralized environments with greater control. Well, okay, Moxie, but then what's the problem here? Is the problem email, or is the problem that people use Gmail? Right? What's the easier thing to do? Or I guess not what's the easier thing. What's the thing to do? Is it to educate people away from using Gmail? Or is it to just be like, well, everybody's using Gmail, so let's just try and make Gmail better? No, I would argue it's to educate people to stop using fucking Gmail. Okay, because it's a much larger, I mean, it's not just like people are using Gmail. The problem is that Google is a gigantic ecosystem in and of itself, and people are giving all of their data to that, and that is being coalesced with other services that aren't federated. So it's not just like you're comparing email and Gmail. You're comparing email to the monolithic Google. So again, false paradigm, in my opinion here. All right, let's read a little bit more. On some level, federation is appealing precisely because it does freeze protocols in time. It's great when centralized clients and servers roll out features that benefit us, but they could just as easily roll out features that don't. Federation gives us more collective control over what changes we accept, but that comes with an unacceptable inability to adapt. Given that federated services always seem to coalesce around a provider that the bulk of people use, federation becomes a sort of implicit threat. Nobody really wants to run their own servers, but they know that it might be possible if their current host does something egregious enough to make it worth the effort. However, over the past 6 years, we've also seen the user costs of switching between centralized communication services reduce substantially, particularly given the tendency towards addressing the user-owned identifiers like phone numbers. The device's address book is now the social network, so using phone numbers as an identifier has reduced switching costs by putting a user's social network under their control. Unless, Moxie, you stop paying your phone bill and you lose your phone number. Then you've got a problem. In a way, reading on, the notification center on a mobile device has become the federation point for all communication apps, similar to how older desktop IM clients unified communication across multiple IM networks. The effect has been visible in the messaging space, where market leaders have come and gone. New popular apps come out of nowhere, and even the most successful players seem compelled to continue iterating and improving their services as quickly as possible. This reduced user friction has begun to extend the implicit threat that used to come with federated services into centralized services as well. Whereas before you could switch hosts or even decide to run your own server, now users are simply switching entire networks. In many cases, that cost is now much lower than the federated switching cost of changing your email address to use a different email provider. An open source infrastructure for a centralized network now provides almost the same level of control as federated protocols without giving up the ability to adapt. If a centralized provider with an open source infrastructure ever makes horrible changes, those that disagree have the software they need to run their own alternative instead. It may not be as beautiful as federation, but at this point it seems that it will have to do. Okay, so Moxie is admitting that federation is, at least I'm reading into it, that he's saying, yes, we do want federation, but it's not how things are shaping up. So let's just move on with, centralized services and all that. It all kind of comes off as a little defeatist, I feel. And there's something to be said for the idea that, the average person really doesn't, they're not on the cusp. They're not on the bleeding edge. And that's true. Okay, and that's fine. And it takes time for everybody to sort of catch up with the rest of the world. Something that's happening with driverless cars right now is that people are,